He that goes a-borrowing goes a-sorrowing, says Benjamin Franklin. Today, most people are favorably disposed toward the idea of simple living, at least in theory. When a person is described as practicing frugality or having simple tastes, this is usually understood as a form of praise, especially if he or she could easily live otherwise. Celebrities who live in modest homes and ride the bus are not just applauded for remaining in touch with the common people. Their lifestyle is also thought to best speak of non-materialistic values, and hence a certain moral health or purity. But even when viewed in this positive light, the notions of thrift, frugality, and simple living carry a number of meanings. According to frugal sages, the concept of simple living is complex. It encompasses a cluster of overlapping ideas. So our first task must be to identify and clarify the most important of these. And one useful way of achieving an initial orientation is to consider some of the synonyms for terms like frugal, thrifty, and simple. According to the modern dictionary, thrift has a common root with thrive. Both derive from the Old Norse thrifa, meaning to grasp or get hold of. In Chaucer's Middle English of the late 14th century, thrifty meant thriving, prosperous, fortunate, or respectable. However, in 18th century dictionary, Samuel Johnson defines thrift as profit, gain, or state of prospering. So, frugal comes from the Latin term frugalis, meaning economical or useful, which is itself derived from frux, meaning fruit, profit, or value. You all must heard of economic prudence, the most familiar and uncomplicated sense of thrift. It finds expression in many well-worn adages like, waste not, want not, a penny saved is a penny earned. Take care of the pennies, and the pounds will take care of themselves, and so on. One frugal sage particularly associated with this idea of fiscal prudence is Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was the archetypical self-made man. At 17, he arrived in Philadelphia, a penniless fugitive. By the age of 40, he was a best-selling author and comfortably off. When he died at 84, he was celebrated as one of the greatest men of his time for his achievements as an entrepreneur, writer, politician, diplomat, scientist, inventor, and philanthropist. An interesting and rather endearing section of his autobiography is his account of how he sought to cultivate within himself 13 specific virtues. The fifth in his list of virtues was frugality, which Franklin defined for himself in this way: make no expense, but to do good to others or yourself, i.e., waste nothing. Truly, frugality seems to have been one that gave Franklin little trouble. One reason for this, according to his own account, was that his wife Deborah was as much disposed to industry and frugality as himself. Franklin says, and I quote, "We kept no idle servants. Our table was plain and simple, our furniture of the cheapest. For instance, my breakfast was for a long time bread and milk, no tea." Do you know? Franklin's essay, The Way to Wealth, contains many of his best-known maxims on frugality, most advising us to live within our means and to beware of waste and luxuries. For example, Franklin wrote, "A fat kitchen makes a lean will. Fools make feasts, and wise men eat them. Get what you can, and what you get hold. This the stone that will turn all your lead into gold." Franklin is especially concerned to warn against the dangers of debt, since He that goes, a borrowing goes a sorrowing. About debt, Franklin says, it exposes a man to confinement and a species of slavery to his creditors. Today, debt is spreading much misery, of course, usually in the form of credit card balances, personal loans, and home mortgages. Therefore, practicing thrift is obviously sensible for those of us who haven't inherited a fortune, who don't possess some highly marketable talent, or who lack the extraordinary salary negotiating skills. However, there can, of course, be circumstances where going into debt temporarily makes sense. For instance, to buy a house, pay for education, take advantage of a business opportunity, or deal with a pressing hardship, such as eviction or a medical emergency. But for most of us, most of the time, Ben Franklin's advice is clearly sound. Beware of little expenses, he says. A small leak will sink a great ship. And who would disagree? Well, there is always Oscar Wilde, according to whom the only thing that can console one for being poor is extravagance, and who, according to one account, lived and died true to his philosophy. Impoverished and on his deathbed in a seedy hotel in Paris, Oscar supposedly raised a glass of champagne and declared, "I die as I have lived, beyond my means." But few aspire to that sort of end. The frugal sages regularly praise self-sufficiency, but they do not all have exactly the same thing in mind. According to the philosophy of frugality, self-sufficiency contrasts with dependence, of which there are two main kinds. First, dependence on another's patronage, and second, dependence on someone else's skills or services, either directly, as when one hires a plumber, or indirectly through technology produced by others. Therefore, self-sufficiency is a matter of degree. Today in our society, very few human beings are capable of surviving outside a community, and within every community, there are cooperative enterprises and some division of labor. Perhaps one of the best-known example of frugal virtue is a fictional character, Robinson Crusoe, one of modernity's first great literary heroes, that exemplifies almost perfect self-sufficiency. Once Crusoe himself sets about making bread, is struck by how ignorant he is of the process. Crusoe says, "I neither knew how to grind, or make meal of my corn, or indeed how to clean it and part it, nor if made into meal, how to make bread of it, and if how to make it. Yet I knew not how to bake it." At that moment, he noticed the strange multitude of little things necessary in the providing, producing, making and finishing one article of bread. In effect, Crusoe's struggle to survive and eventually thrive, purely by his own wits and labor, becomes a metaphor for a different kind of self-sufficiency, the sort that allows individuals to make their own fortune through ingenuity and hard work. Needless to say, self-sufficiency is linked to living frugally, since when you do something for yourself, you don't pay someone else to do it. But the obvious truth is that most of us living in modernized societies are a million miles from self-sufficiency. Yes, we might cultivate a vegetable garden, learn how to bake bread, and build a bookcase or two. Such activities are not to be despised. Apart from saving money, they can be intrinsically rewarding. But unless they add up to a definite lifestyle, we should not kid ourselves that we are doing more than playing at self-sufficiency. Most of us depend on others to build and equip our houses, grow and distribute our food, make our clothes, and provide our entertainment. Today, we rely on a complex infrastructure for energy, transport, communication, and education, and we are hopelessly lost without our cars, phones, computers, stoves, and refrigerators. A new generation is now literally lost without a GPS navigation device. Thus, one further complication in the link between self-sufficiency and simplicity is worth noting. Self-sufficiency may be part of the traditional notion and the romantic ideal of simple living, but in fairly obvious ways, using technology can simplify our lives considerably. Ask yourself, which is simpler, washing all your clothes and sheets by hand or using a washing machine, collecting and chopping wood to make a fire to cook over, or turning on the gas burner and pushing the electric ignition button? The point here is that the concept of simple living contains cross-currents. Reducing our dependence on infrastructure and technology may bring us closer to simple living in one sense. We are more self-sufficient, but takes us away from it in other ways, since it makes basic tasks much more difficult, arduous, and time-consuming. And in some ways, technology can even help us to be more self-sufficient, as when we use a washing machine to do our own laundry instead of using servants or sending it out. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more empowering content. And if our content has inspired you, consider supporting our channel by becoming a member or giving super. Your contributions enable us to keep delivering valuable and uplifting content. Thanks for watching.